Michelle had always worked the night shift at Walmart. She liked the quiet. The store was mostly empty, except for a few night owls and the occasional insomniac. She thought of it as her own little world. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the echo of her footsteps down the empty aisles, and the comforting predictability of stocking shelves and organizing displays gave her a sense of calm. But tonight was different. It started with a feeling, an unsettling twinge at the back of her neck, like she was being watched. She shrugged it off, telling herself she was just being paranoid, but as the clock ticked past midnight, the feeling grew stronger. She felt the hairs on her arms stand on end as she pushed a cart of boxed goods down the deserted cereal aisle, and then she saw him. At first, it was just a shadow, a figure at the far end of the aisle. He was tall, lanky, and dressed in a dark hoodie. He stood perfectly still, just watching her. Michelle's heart skipped a beat. She tried to ignore him, focusing on her work, but she could feel his eyes boring into her back. She glanced up again, and he was gone. Breathing a sigh of relief, she told herself it was just her imagination. She continued stocking the shelves, trying to shake off the creepy feeling. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget the look in his eyes. Cold, empty, like he was looking right through her. The store's PA system crackled to life, and Michelle nearly jumped out of her skin. It was just the store manager, Jerry, reminding everyone about a meeting next week. She forced herself to laugh at her own jumpiness and continued working. But then she heard footsteps. Slow, purposeful footsteps echoing down the empty aisles. She froze, listening. The footsteps stopped. The silence was deafening. She turned around, but there was no one there. She shook her head, trying to clear the fog of fear that was clouding her mind. As she moved to the next aisle, she saw a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye. She spun around, and there he was again, the man in the hoodie. This time, he was closer. Too close. She could see his face now, a pale mask of madness with a twisted smile that made her blood run cold. "Can I help you?" she managed to stammer, her voice shaking. The man just stared at her, his smile widening. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, watching her. Michelle's heart pounded in her chest. She backed away slowly, never taking her eyes off him. She reached the end of the aisle and turned, breaking into a run. She raced to the break room, her safe haven. She burst through the door and slammed it shut behind her, locking it. She leaned against the door, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. She dialed Jerry's number, praying he was still in the store. "Jerry, it's Michelle," she whispered urgently when he picked up. "There's a man in the store. He's following me." Jerry's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Are you sure, Michelle? Maybe it's just a customer." "No," she insisted. "He's not a customer. There's something wrong with him. Please, come to the break room." "I'll be right there," Jerry said. Michelle hung up, trying to steady her nerves. She glanced around the break room, searching for something to defend herself with. Her eyes landed on a heavy metal stapler. She grabbed it, clutching it like a lifeline. The minutes dragged on as she waited for Jerry. Finally, she heard footsteps approaching the break room. She held her breath, hoping it was Jerry. The doorknob rattled, and then the door creaked open. It was Jerry. Relief flooded through her, and she ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God you're here," she sobbed. "He is out there, Jerry. He wants to hurt me." Jerry hugged her awkwardly, patting her back. "It's okay, Michelle. We'll find him." They left the break room together, Jerry leading the way. The store was eerily silent, the only sound the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights. They checked aisle after aisle, but the man was nowhere to be found. "Maybe he left," Jerry suggested. Michelle shook her head. "No, he's here. I can feel it." They continued searching, but the man had vanished. After an hour, Jerry convinced Michelle to go back to work. Reluctantly, she agreed. She returned to stocking the shelves, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, her shift ended. She clocked out and hurried to her car, glancing over her shoulder the entire way. She locked the doors and drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she got home, she double-checked all the locks and windows before collapsing into bed. She was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's face, that twisted smile, those cold, empty eyes. Days passed, and Michelle tried to convince herself it was all in her head, but she couldn't escape the feeling of dread that hung over her like a dark cloud. She stopped working the night shift, asking for daytime hours instead, but even in the bright light of day, she couldn't shake the fear. One night, as she was getting ready for bed, she heard a noise outside her window. Her heart raced as she crept to the window and peeked out. Her blood turned to ice. There he was, the man in the hoodie, standing in her yard, staring up at her window with that same twisted smile. She screamed, slamming the window shut and drawing the curtains. She called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. They took her statement and promised to patrol the area, but Michelle knew they wouldn't find him. He was playing a game, a sick, twisted game, and she was his prey. The nightmare started soon after. She dreamed of him creeping into her house, standing over her bed, his cold breath on her neck. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, but the nightmares felt so real. One night, she woke to find her bedroom door open. She was sure she had closed it. Her heart pounded as she got up to close it, but as she reached for the doorknob, she felt a hand on her shoulder. She spun around, but there was no one there. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she slammed the door shut and locked it. She climbed back into bed, pulling the covers over her head like a frightened child. Sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind made her jump. She knew he was out there watching her, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. The days blurred into a haze of fear and exhaustion. She stopped going to work, stopped leaving the house. She barely ate, barely slept. She became a prisoner in her own home, trapped by her own terror. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a noise downstairs, a faint, almost imperceptible creak. She could barely breathe. She grabbed the big flashlight from her nightstand and crept to the top of the stairs. The house was dark and silent. She strained her ears, listening for any sound. Then she heard it again, a soft, slow creak, like someone was creeping up the stairs. Her heart pounded in her chest as she gripped the flashlight tighter. She took a deep breath and started down the stairs, one step at a time. The creaking grew louder with each step. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw him, the man in the hoodie. He stood in the middle of her living room, his twisted smile illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He tilted his head, his smile widening. "Because I like you," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. She backed away, but he took a step forward. "Stay away from me," she pleaded, raising the flashlight. He laughed, a low, menacing sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You can't stop me, Michelle," he said. "No one can." She turned and ran, but he was faster. He grabbed her, pulling her back. She screamed, struggling to break free, but his grip was like iron. He pushed her to the floor, his cold hands wrapping around her throat. She fought with everything she had, but he was too strong. Her vision blurred, darkness closing in around her. She could feel her life slipping away. Then, suddenly, the pressure released. She gasped for air, coughing and choking. She looked up and he was gone. She lay on the floor, shaking and sobbing, too terrified to move. The police found her the next morning, curled up in a ball on the living room floor. She told them everything, but they didn't believe her. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been in the house. They said it was just a nightmare, but Michelle knew the truth. He was still out there, waiting for her. She just knew he would come back. She tried to resume a normal life, but every shadow held a threat, every noise a potential horror. Michelle couldn't escape the feeling that she was never alone, that he was always just around the corner, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Months passed and the terror began to dull, replaced by a numbness. She went back to work, though she never felt safe. Her colleagues noticed the change in her, the way she jumped at every sound, the dark circles under her eyes, the haunted look she carried. One quiet night, Michelle was restocking the shelves, trying to lose herself in the monotony of the task. The store was unusually empty, the silence almost comforting. She moved methodically, her mind wandering, when she heard a faint noise behind her. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She slowly turned, her eyes scanning the aisle. Nothing. She let out a shaky breath and forced herself to continue working, but the noises came again, louder this time. A soft, eerie whispering, just on the edge of hearing. She spun around, her eyes wide with fear. The aisle was empty. She was alone, or so it seemed. She took a step forward, her hand clutching the box cutter in her pocket. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of voices hissing her name. Michelle. Michelle. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. She backed away, her eyes darting around the empty store. The lights flickered, casting long, twisted shadows. She felt the familiar sensation of being watched, her skin prickling with fear. Michelle. The whispering was closer now, surrounding her. She turned, ready to run, but something cold and sharp pressed against her neck. She froze, the box cutter falling from her trembling hand. "Hello, Michelle," a voice whispered in her ear. It was him. She could feel his breath on her skin, his hand gripping her shoulder. "Why?" she managed to choke out, her voice barely a whisper. "Because it's fun," he replied, his voice dripping with malice. "You're my favorite game." She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt the cold blade against her skin, felt his cruel grip tightening. Desperation surged through her, and she fought with everything she had, struggling to break free. But he was too strong. His grip tightened, and the world began to fade. She could feel herself slipping away, darkness closing in around her. And then, suddenly, he was gone. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The store was silent, the whispering voices gone. She looked around, but there was no sign of him. Michelle knew he would be back someday. He was always hiding and stalking her, and no matter where she went, no matter what she did, she could never escape him. The nights grew longer, each one filled with terror and dread. She could feel him closing in, could hear his whispers in the darkness. And every time she closed her eyes, she saw his twisted smile, felt his cold breath on her neck. Michelle knew the truth. She was trapped in his game, a pawn in his sick, twisted world, and there was no way out. The fluorescent lights flickered above Ingrid and Amanda as they stood behind the customer service desk at Walmart. It was just another ordinary Tuesday afternoon, or so they thought. The store buzzed with shoppers, carts squeaking and cash registers beeping. Ingrid, with her dark hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, scanned items with practiced ease, while Amanda, her blonde colleague, assisted customers with returns. The door chime rang as a man in his late 30s stomped towards them. His face was red, his eyes wild with anger. He slammed a box of broken electronics on the counter.
"This is the third time I've returned this piece of junk,"
he yelled. His name tag read, Mike. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir," Ingrid said calmly. "Let's see what we can do for you."
"I don't want your apologies. I want my money back."
Mike's voice echoed through the store. Amanda stepped in, trying to defuse the situation. "We understand your frustration. We'll process the return immediately." Mike's eyes darted between them, his breath heavy and erratic.
"You think this is funny? You think you can treat customers like this and get away with it?"
"No, sir, we're just trying to help," Amanda replied, her voice shaking slightly. Mike leaned in, his face inches from Ingrid's.
"You better watch yourselves. I'll make sure you regret this."
With that, he stormed out of the store, leaving Ingrid and Amanda shaken but relieved he was gone. They exchanged nervous glances and tried to laugh it off, but a sense of unease lingered. Hours passed, and the afternoon sun dipped towards the horizon. The store grew quieter as the late evening approached. The store was closing as Ingrid and Amanda were finishing their shifts, ready to clock out and head home. As they walked towards the employee exit, they noticed something strange. The parking lot, usually filled with cars and people, was eerily empty. "Do you feel that?" Amanda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Ingrid replied, glancing around. "Something's off." They quickened their pace, heading towards their cars. Suddenly, the overhead lights in the parking lot flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. "What the hell?" Amanda exclaimed, fumbling for her phone to use as a flashlight. Before she could turn it on, they heard a noise, a soft, menacing chuckle. They spun around, the dim light from the store casting long shadows. Mike stepped out from behind a row of parked cars, his face twisted into a sinister grin.
"I told you I'd make you regret it,"
he said, his voice low and threatening. "What do you want?" Ingrid demanded, her voice trembling.
"Oh, just a little payback,"
he replied, pulling something from his jacket. The glint of a knife caught the faint light. Amanda grabbed Ingrid's hand. "Run!" she screamed. They bolted towards the store, their hearts pounding in their chests. Mike's footsteps echoed behind them, growing louder with each second. They reached the doors and banged on them desperately, but they were locked. Ingrid spotted a maintenance door to the side. "This way," she yelled, pulling Amanda towards it. They ducked inside, slamming the door behind them and locking it. The narrow hallway was dimly lit, filled with cleaning supplies and clutter. They could hear Mike outside, his footsteps slow and methodical. He was toying with them, savoring their fear. "We need to find another way out," Amanda whispered, tears streaming down her face. They crept down the hallway, every creak and groan of the building amplifying their terror. They found another door and pushed it open, emerging into the darkened store. The aisles were empty, the shelves casting eerie shadows. "Stay quiet," Ingrid whispered, leading the way towards the front of the store. They heard Mike's voice, taunting them from the darkness.
"You can't hide forever. I'll find you."
Ingrid spotted the security office and motioned for Amanda to follow. They slipped inside and locked the door, their breaths ragged and panicked. "We need to call the police," Ingrid said, grabbing the phone. She dialed 911, her hands shaking. "911, what's your emergency?" The operator answered. "There's a man that has a knife and is hunting us at the Walmart on Elm Street," Ingrid replied urgently. "Please, hurry now." "We're dispatching officers to your location. Stay on the line." They heard a loud crash as Mike smashed through the maintenance door. His footsteps grew louder, closer. "He's coming," Amanda whispered, clutching Ingrid's arm. The door handle rattled, and they saw the blade of Mike's knife slide through the crack in the door. He laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines.
"Open up, ladies. Let's end this."
Ingrid and Amanda backed away, searching for anything to defend themselves with. Ingrid grabbed a heavy flashlight, her hand shaking. The door splintered as Mike forced his way in. His eyes were wild, his smile twisted.
"Time to pay,"
he hissed, lunging at them. Ingrid swung the flashlight with all her strength, hitting Mike in the head. He stumbled but didn't fall. Amanda grabbed a chair and threw it at him, but he dodged it easily.
"You think you can stop me?"
he snarled, slashing at them with the knife. They dodged his attacks, the narrow room working to their advantage. Mike swung wildly, his anger blinding him. Ingrid saw an opening and tackled him, knocking the knife from his hand. Amanda joined in, helping to try and restrain the psychopath. Ingrid pulled his arm up around his back while he was on his stomach. It felt as if she was about to break his arm. He yelled out in pain as both women sat on him, their weight restraining him and pinning him to the ground. They held him there until the sound of sirens filled the air. Moments later, police officers burst into the room, securing Mike on the ground and handcuffing him. He thrashed and screamed, but they held him tight. Ingrid and Amanda collapsed, trembling and exhausted. The officers helped them up, assuring them they were safe now. As they walked out of the store, they were checked out by paramedics on the scene. The nightmare was over, but the memory of that terrifying night would haunt them forever. The eerie feeling of being hunted, the cold eyes of a madman, and the darkness that had swallowed the familiar aisles of Walmart would stay with them, a chilling reminder of how quickly normal can turn into horror. Noah had been working at Walmart for 3 years. It wasn't his dream job, but it paid the bills. He stocked shelves, helped customers, and cleaned up spills. His shift started at 8 a.m. and he usually left by 5 p.m. The routine was comforting, in a way, but recently Noah had noticed something unsettling. It started about a month ago. Noah was putting away some new inventory when he felt a pair of eyes on him. He turned around, expecting to see a customer needing help, but there was no one there. Shrugging it off, he continued working, but the feeling persisted. A few days later, as Noah was leaving work, he saw a man standing by the entrance. The man was tall and thin, with a gaunt face and piercing eyes. He was staring directly at Noah. It made his skin crawl. Noah quickly got into his car and drove home, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. The next day, the man was there again. This time, he was closer. Noah tried to ignore him, but he could feel the man's eyes following him. He mentioned it to a coworker, but they brushed it off, saying it was probably just a customer. Noah wasn't so sure. Days turned into weeks, and the man's presence became a regular occurrence. He would appear in different parts of the store, always watching, always silent. Noah started to dread going to work. He felt like he was being hunted. One evening, after a particularly long shift, Noah was walking to his car when he heard footsteps behind him. His heart raced as he quickened his pace. The footsteps grew louder. Noah turned around, but there was no one there. He hurried to his car, got in, and locked the doors. As he drove away, he saw the man standing in the parking lot, watching him. Noah's anxiety grew worse. He started looking over his shoulder, expecting to see the man at every turn. He even started changing his routine, taking different routes home, hoping to lose the stalker, but the man always found him. One Saturday afternoon, Noah decided to confront the man. He saw him lurking near the electronics section and marched over. "Why are you following me?" Noah demanded. The man just stared at him with those cold, empty eyes. Noah felt a chill run down his spine. Without saying a word, the man turned and walked away. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside his window made him jump. He got up to check the locks on his doors and windows several times. The man's face haunted his thoughts. The next morning, Noah was exhausted but went to work anyway. As he was stocking shelves, he noticed the man again. This time, he was closer than ever. Noah's hand shook as he tried to focus on his task. The man stepped closer, invading his personal space. Noah could smell his stale breath. "Leave me alone," Noah whispered, his voice trembling. The man smiled a slow, eerie smile that sent shivers down Noah's spine.
"You can't escape me,"
he said softly. Noah dropped the box he was holding and backed away, bumping into a display. That evening, Noah was on edge. He practically ran to his car and sped home. He felt a sense of relief as he pulled into his driveway, but it was short-lived. As he got out of the car, he saw the man standing on the sidewalk, watching him. Noah rushed inside and locked the door. He called the police, but they couldn't do much without proof of a threat. They promised to come by and check it out, but Noah knew it wouldn't be enough. The man was relentless. The police did patrol the neighborhood that night. They knocked on Noah's door to take a statement and let him know that they did not find any man lurking around the area. The following week was a blur of fear and paranoia. Noah saw the man everywhere, at work, on his drive home, even outside his house at night. The man never spoke again, just watched with that unnerving smile. Noah was at his breaking point. He decided to take a few days off work, hoping the man would lose interest. He stayed inside, keeping the doors locked and the curtains drawn, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave him. On the third night of his self-imposed isolation, Noah woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like someone trying to open a window. His heart pounded as he crept downstairs. In the dim light, he saw a shadowy figure outside the window. It was the man. Noah grabbed a kitchen knife and dialed 911. As he waited for the police, the man started tapping on the window. A slow, rhythmic tap that echoed in the silent house. Noah felt like he was losing his mind. The police arrived and searched the area, but the man was gone. They told Noah to stay vigilant and assured him that they would keep an eye out, but no one knew the man would be back. The next day, Noah decided he couldn't live like this anymore. He packed a bag and drove to a hotel, hoping to find some peace. But as he checked in, he saw the man standing in the lobby, watching him with that same chilling smile. Noah could feel the color drain from his face. There was no escaping the stalker. The man was everywhere, always watching, always following, always there. Noah realized that his nightmare was far from over. The man would follow him to the ends of the earth, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Noah's life had become a living hell, a twisted game of cat and mouse where the stalker always had the upper hand. And as he lay in the unfamiliar bed of the hotel room, he knew that he would never be free from the terror that had taken over his life.